Hello everyone, Underdog Chris here, bringing you all another video. This video is actually going to be somewhat of a continuation of a previous video that I worked on before, which was the tragic fate of YuGiOh. In that video, I briefly touched upon the Zero Reverse disaster and the group behind it, that being Yiliaster. Well, I think there's way more to the story than meets the eye, which I will get into throughout the course of this video. But fair warning, this might be one of my wildest, most insane videos yet, so you'll have to bear with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that Yiliaster had a hit list. Now, before I get into why I think Yiliaster had a hit out on a lot of the important people from the main cast of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, I do want to give a brief explanation as to who they are. For those that may be a little unfamiliar with them or might need a refresher, the name Yiliaster, according to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki, means the first chaos in a matter of all things, and they were said to have originated in South America 3,000 years ago. So you can already tell from their name and their name's meaning that this is not a group that you would ever run across with or trifle with, as they're known for throwing things into chaos to further their own goals and ambitions. Yiliaster, as I've stated in the past, is quite literally the Yu-Gi-Oh! Illuminati. One thing that Yiliaster and the real-world Illuminati have in common is the fact that they have their eyes everywhere. They have their hand in everything, whether it be in politics, religion, or anything else in society, you name it. Now, before I go on a rabbit hole of the real Illuminati, I do want to bring this back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, from what we've seen throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Yiliaster, at first glance, seems to have been retconned, considering how 5Ds gets all futuristic after the defeat of the Dark Signers at the end of the first half. In the first half of 5Ds, Yiliaster seems to be portrayed as this mystical secret society of Star Guardians who influence the world from the shadows, though apparently, Goodwin's goons from the Fortune Cup like Professor Frank, Greiger, Ransborg, Commander Koda, and whoever this dude was, were also a part of Yiliaster and were known as the Yiliaster Dueling Assassins, made to suss out the signers during the Fortune Cup and prepare them to fight the Dark Signers later on. Goodwin himself was very shady in his run in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which aligns with Yiliaster's shady tendencies as well, with both believing that they are doing everything for the betterment of the human race. Though despite them moving away from the mystical people of the stars aspect and taking a more robotic and futuristic approach, the second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds has a take on Yiliaster that tries to tie up the loose ends, with Jacob, or Jose in the Japanese version, stating that Zone founded Yiliaster and had tried to course correct the human race several times for hundreds of years, which seems like, oh, this doesn't really line up with anything. It wasn't stated in the series prior that Zone was their leader, and he wasn't really alluded to. But what I think this means is that Zone went back in time and took control of this organization for himself at some point, establishing his rhetoric and his objectives within it. And it's pretty apparent, as Yiliaster themselves stated that they destroyed several civilizations with the premise that they were bettering the human race, and that their ends justified the means no matter how many lives were sacrificed in the process, which does line up with Zone's actions and his character throughout the second half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. This also ties in perfectly with the Zero Reverse incident, which occurred 17 years prior to the start of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. In this disaster, the Energy Reactor system overloaded and destroyed the old Domino City, killing a lot of people in the process, and a portion of the old Domino City broke off and made itself its own island, known as Satellite, and it's basically where a lot of the old junky remnants of the disaster and the old Domino City came to be, before it was fixed up by the second half of the series. But in the meantime, from what was left on the mainland, the old Domino City became repurposed and rebuilt as Neo Domino City. But there are a few things to know. One thing is the fact that Kaiba Corp is actually still around, but Seto and Mokuba Kaiba are nowhere to be found. Well, I think there's a reason for that. One theory I have is that they died during Zero Reverse, much like Yugi and anyone else who happened to be in Domino City at the time. This is because Yiliaster saw them as threats to their goals, so they figured they had to get rid of them. I mean, While I theorized in the past that Yugi wasn't really much of a duelist anymore, at the same time, I did state that Yugi could have possibly gotten wind of Yiliaster's shady dealings and could have tried to put a stop to them himself. There's not only that, but I also theorized that Kaiba tried to do something about them as well. I mean, as we can tell, Kaiba doesn't exactly appear to be a fan of cults or anything to do with mysticism or conspiracies. I mean, he dealt with the Rare Hunters in Battle City and Darts' cult Doma during Season 4, so Seto Kaiba probably knew of the danger and hindrance to his company that Yiliaster could pose, and so I would say that he tried his best to get rid of them, himself and an adult Mokuba, only for both of them to lose the company to Yiliaster. It's not that much of a stretch to theorize this. I mean, Alistair and Darts during Season 4 of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime managed to buy the entirety of Kaiba Corp in order to further their own goals and throw Kaiba into disarray. So imagine what Yiliaster, a whole secret society, could do to Kaiba Corporation. In all honesty, Kaiba and Mokuba would have probably either died in Zero Reverse or could have been outright executed beforehand as a show of power from Yiliaster. I know that Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, shout out to him by the way, has made a theory on Kaiba and Yiliaster being in cahoots the whole time, and on Kaiba being the Antichrist of the Yu-Gi-Oh! World, and while I disagree with this sentiment, at the same time, it's a very entertaining video that's worth a watch for anyone that's looking to get into more Yu-Gi-Oh! Theories, but I want to get back on track for a bit. One thing to note is that in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's anime in the flashback, it stated that Dr. Fudo, Yusei Fudo's father, alongside Rex and Roman Goodwin, worked in Kaiba Corp's Reactor Research Division, known as RRD, or MIDS in the Japanese version. In this division, scientists would study energy, better known as momentum energy. However, Dr. Fudo himself had informed his fellow work colleagues at Kaiba Corp that continuing any further projects with this dangerous form of energy could lead to drastic consequences, and the committee's response was to oust Dr. Fudo from his position at RRD and remove him from the project, practically blacklisting him and replacing him with Roman Goodwin instead. Dr. Fudo then tries to run with the Signer Dragons in a desperate attempt to defy them, and he ends up getting shot down in the process. He somehow manages to live through this and doesn't trust the Signer Dragons to Rex Goodwin. I mean, with how they almost killed Dr. Fudo right here, I have no doubt in my mind that Yiliaster employed similar tactics with getting rid of some of the other characters. And we also see that in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds in the Japanese version that there's mention of a Pegasus Memorial Foundation, and anything to do with memorials of course has to do with somebody who's already passed on, and Pegasus was 24 during the Duel Monsters anime, and 34 in GX, which again, is 10 years after the original Duel Monsters anime. I'd say that by 5Ds he would have still been alive and kicking, because Tetsu Trudge or YuGiOh in the Japanese version was still very much alive, and he actually first appeared in the first ever chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh's manga, Season 0, and was referenced in the Duel Monsters anime as well. He had survived Zero Reverse and looked to be middle-aged or higher. Pegasus was only 8 years older than YuGiOh, so it's safe to say that he didn't just die of natural causes. No. Yiliaster got rid of him too. I theorized that Pegasus was starting to see the writing on the wall after Yiliaster took over Kaiba Corp. He feared for his life as he was targeted before by Darts in the past, so this would have just been deja vu for him. Not to mention, Paradox, an agent of Zone's Yiliaster, and the villain of the 10th anniversary movie, was tasked with killing a past version of Pegasus, so Yiliaster probably killed this much older Pegasus as well. He had already lost his Millennium Eye decades ago by this point, and he's an older man, so he probably would have been an even easier target. But you're probably wondering, well, what about the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX characters? Well, I theorized that the same thing happened to the GX cast. The 5D's dub makes small hints that some of the GX characters like Aster Phoenix and the Truesdale brothers are still alive, but no such thing is said in the original version of the anime. Same with Joey Wheeler's quote-unquote cousin Jesse Wheeler. This was a dub-only thing, and this guy in the original version was just a random nobody. Anyway, moving on from the dubisms, I do believe that the important GX characters were killed off individually as well. It didn't even have to be through duels either, as with an organization like Yiliaster, they probably have their methods for getting rid of people who could pose a problem to them later on. You're probably thinking, well, Jaden Yugi, the main character of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, he's fused with Yubel and has a connection to dual monster spirits, so he's safe, right? Well, not really. Remember Professor Frank, one of the Yiliaster members I mentioned before? Well, this crazy man somehow had access to the dual monster spirit world in his duel against Luna, one of the signers of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. So, considering that Yiliaster had someone like that in their midst, they probably had the resources to deal with somebody like Jaden. And so, with all of these people dead, Zone and the rest of Yiliaster could enact their nefarious plans to better the human race. They came at the cost of millions of lives throughout several millennia and left a dark impact on the Yu-Gi-Oh! World forever. And with all that being said, that's about it for today's video. I had a lot of fun making this video as I've always been a fan of wild, insane anime theories, and I'm so glad that I was able to put one of my own out there. I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing day.